Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Chelsea Wilson, and I work with the marketing team at Achieva Credit Union. We value your partnership with the Dunedin community and recognize that many small businesses are struggling to navigate the uncertainty of COVID-19. And we're proud to come together in partnership with the City of Dunedin, the Dunedin Chamber of Commerce, and Downtown Dunedin Merchants Association to offer this webinar and virtual discussion as a resource for the options available to you as a small business owner. Topic discussions today will include Emergency Bridge Loan, SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan, CARES Act, and Paycheck Protection Program. As an attendee, you are muted, but if you have questions throughout the presentation, please submit them using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to address them at the end. This presentation will be recorded and made available to you on the City of Dunedin, Chamber of Commerce, and Achieva Credit Union websites. We appreciate our speakers and presenters today, including Bob Ironsmith, the Dunedin Economic and Housing Development and CRA Director, Jennifer Bramley, Dunedin City Manager, Curt Forrester, Business Consultant for the Florida Small Business Development Center at Pinellas County Economic Development, Paul Rush, Real Estate and SBA Lending Attorney at Trenholm Law, and Laurel Flynn, Vice President of Business Lending at Achieva Credit Union. So let's get started. I'd like to first introduce Bob Ironsmith, Dunedin Economic and Housing Development and CRA Director. Bob?
Well, good afternoon, Chelsea. I don't think Bob is on the line, so I'm going to take over for Bob. This is Jennifer Bramley.
Yeah, Bob here.
No, we're missing Bob. Well, maybe he'll join us in a little bit.
Well,
good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of
the technology here.
Yeah, it's tough. On behalf of the City of Dunedin, I want to welcome you to the webinar. I'd like to thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank our partners, the Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Dunedin Merchants Association, and Achieva for organizing this session. I hope that all of you will find it helpful. The City Commission has directed city staff to allocate our available resources to support our Dunedin business community during the pandemic. We understand that you're struggling and that you're facing an uncertain future, and we're there with you. The city is committed, along with our partners, to support you through the pandemic and to assist you in your recovery, which is right around the corner, we hope. As far as the city goes, our workforce has been dispersed to keep them safe, but our essential operations remain in place, and we haven't stepped back at all from our current levels of service. As I said before, we're here to help, and we'll be available to answer any questions that you have. We understand that this is not going to be a short-term recovery. It's going to be a long-term, and we're going to be with you every step of the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So with that, I believe we're ready to go on to Curt Forrester, Business Consultant for the Florida Small Business Development Center at Pinellas County Economic Development.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to share some information with you about the State of Florida Small Business Emergency Loan Program. This loan program went into effect on March 16th by Governor DeSantis' order. He released $50 million to be distributed in the loan program. It's available to small businesses of 2 to 100 employees, and that is part of the application. People will have to be able to show that they have employees or at least 1099 workers of 2 or more. So it is kind of a specific loan, but let me get into the details a little bit about it. Small businesses can qualify for up to $50,000 of interest-free money for 12 months with this loan. The loan is designed to bridge the time from the current disaster to when a business might have other funds, particularly from another disaster loan. So it's designed to be used in tandem with the federal loans that you'll hear more about later today. I'd like to share with you the best places to get more information about this loan and maybe some of the others. So if you'd like to apply for the Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Fund, you'd go to floridajobs.org and follow the path to make your application there. The application will ask for 2 years of tax returns and 2 years of business tax returns, so both personal tax returns and business tax returns. And what it doesn't ask for is this evidence of 2 or more employees. So once you've been collected by the system and assigned to a small business development center consultant like myself, that person will get back with you, and you'll have to also provide evidence of 2 or more employees and maybe a few other things to satisfy a loan review committee. Essentially, each one of these loans starts with the application, includes a credit check, and then goes before a loan review committee to make sure that everything's in place and that the people who are designed for the loan are the ones getting the money. It's up, as I mentioned before, it's up to $50,000 available at an interest-free loan for 12 months. There's also a special provision for people who have a higher credit score and maybe only need $25,000, that they can get through the loan process without seeing the loan review committee. So it's a little bit faster process. But whatever the case, the place to go is to floridajobs.org to apply for that loan. I also want to mention one other website that's very helpful, and that's at floridasbdc.org. At that site, you'll find this loan mentioned with a link to get to the application, as well as the other federal loans, which you're going to hear more about this afternoon from some other presenters. So it's a nice one-stop place where you can learn more about each of the loans, and then each of them has a link where you can go and fill that application out for that specific loan. And again, if I can just remind everyone that the Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan is designed to be used in tandem with these other loans that you'll hear about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Curt. Okay, next we'll move on to Paul Rush, Real Estate and SBA Lending Attorney at Trenholm Law.
Thank you, Chelsea. Hello, everybody. I think that was a perfect segue from Curt's presentation through what the state of Florida offers. Probably for the next half hour or so, I'm going to go through with you all the various programs that the federal government rolled out, specifically through the CARES Act and through the disaster loan programs that have been available over the past several weeks. First off, I want to start off by saying I hope everyone's staying safe. I've never seen the financial services industry band together for a fight like this since I've been in practice, and it's very nice to see everyone coming together during this difficult time. Before I get into the 3 different programs that the federal government and the United States Small Business Administration, otherwise known as the SBA, has been rolling out over the past several weeks, I wanted to touch on the fact that many small businesses, maybe some that have owners that are currently listening into this webinar, may currently have an SBA loan, whether it be a 7A program loan or a 504 loan or other various SBA loan options. If that is you, please know that there are other available options to you outside of new loan programs. The SBA has rolled out provisions that there are loan payment deferment options for those who are currently holding an SBA loan. So just because there's these new programs does not mean that if you currently have an SBA loan, there isn't other options available to you. So I think the big takeaway from this whole presentation will be that time is of the essence. Many of these programs are first come, first served. And if you already have an SBA loan, I highly recommend you reach out to your SBA lender to get further information out on how they can help your business. There will be links and other areas throughout this presentation, and certainly at the end. I know Laurel Flynn is on the line. Her team at Achieva Credit Union is one of the approved SBA lenders, and the credit union will be available, and certainly this presentation will be available on the website in order for people to access later on. I'm going to have to keep it very broad and a rough overview of all the programs. Some of the specific options in each, I could fill up a whole day's worth of presentations on, so you can imagine. So want to make sure you all get the gist of here. So turning to the slide, the the three available options right now, the Paycheck Protection Program loan, or otherwise known as the PPP Loan Program, you all are on a very unique position because the SBA just rolled out its final interim rule late last night. There's been a lot of back and forth on how the PPP loan program was going to be enacted, and today marks the first day that small businesses can apply with SBA approved lenders. There's only about 1,600 or 1,800, I believe, SBA lenders in the nation. So you can imagine that's not many if you spread it out the country. Achieva Credit Union is one of them we partner with, and we recommend you reach out to someone who is familiar with SBA if you're particularly interested in this program. As the name suggests, this is for people who have been forced by the state of Florida or by the federal government to close their doors, and it is assigned to help those keep their payroll and maintain payroll, amongst other options that we'll get into later. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, otherwise called as EIDL Loan Program, this is a low interest fixed rate loan provided up to $2 million for small businesses. I like to refer to this as a cash flow loan. We'll get into specifics of that as well, but it's important to know that these first two, as opposed, in addition to the loans that Curt had just mentioned, these are loans, not grants. The third option is in partner with the EIDL disaster loan application, and the CARES Act, which was passed by the House on the 27th of March and signed into law by President Trump, creates $10 billion in grants to these small businesses. So roughly 1 million businesses that apply will receive a $10,000 check grant directly deposited into their account. Legislation says that this is supposed to occur within 72 hours of approval of that application. Due to the severe demand, it may take a couple more days, but if you were recently approved for a $10,000 grant online through the EIDL grant program, you can expect to see that $10,000 within the first 3-4 days. Again, if you do not see that within the 3 or 4 days of approval of that application, it's likely it will be coming in the next couple days. So we'll turn to the next slide. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but I think it's helpful for people, especially if they want to come back and rewatch this when it's recorded. By no means is this what every SBA lender is going to require, but it's just a good heads up of what due diligence you can all start preparing with your companies as to what to get prepared for when you submit your application to an SBA lender. For example, you'll see here, specifically for the Paycheck Protection Loan Program, you're going to want to have your payroll reports from last year and the year 2020 year to date, showing your gross wages, paid time off, paid vacation, paid for family medical leave, state and local taxes. This also includes if you have independent contractors, which we'll get to. If you have any independent contractors on payroll, unfortunately, they'll have to apply separately through the program, but you should still include them on your information you're providing to the lender. This calls for your 2019 tax return or 2019 profit and loss report and balance sheet, as well as documentation that will show, any funds that you may have received from an EIDL loan that you've already applied for online, payments for group healthcare benefits, payments of any retirement benefits, includes 401k contributions. And we'll get to this a little bit further. We'll touch on the fact that the PPP loan program does have a loan forgiveness component if those use of proceeds are used in accordance to the way that loan program allows. So in order to make sure that your loan may be forgiven, these items here you would want to have in place to show to your lender. And just make sure that you keep tabs on this. And of course, whoever you decide to partner with, whether it's Achieva or if you have a current bank partner or credit union partner, we want to make sure that you have all of this information at a minimum as they may be asking you for these items. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to touch on this for one moment before we get into the back and forth comparison of all the loans. And I think the main gist of this presentation for all of you is to see what option works best for your business. And keep in mind, maybe that option may be none of them, but we want to make sure that you're all well informed. So the question here that we've been getting a lot of this week is, can small business borrowers refinance an existing EIDL loan to be forgiven along with the Paycheck Protection Program loan? The answer is yes. However, the loan must be issued since January 31 of this year and be a covered expense under the Payroll Protection Loan Program in order to be forgiven. I just want to keep that in mind, everyone, because there's been a lot of information out there that just because you applied for an EIDL loan program, you're automatically disqualified for a Paycheck Protection loan. That is not correct. So just because you have applied for other assistance before this was enacted and put into law under the CARES Act, I want to make sure that people know that there are still options for you and there is a way that it can be refinanced into the Paycheck Protection loan. Next slide, please. All right, so the loan programs in comparison, I think the best way to accomplish this, and certainly will be available for questions even after the webinar, is to go through the PPP loan program, the EIDL loan program, and in very limited basis, the grant program, because that's just the $10,000 grant that may be available to small businesses when they apply online directly through the SBA. So I'm going to go through a number of the various topics and talk to you about each one specifically and how they compare to each other. I think the main message I want to get across today is that small businesses should get started now. The Paycheck Protection Program is very much a first come, first served program, and it is extended through the end of June 2020, or if the funds dry up. So I cannot stress this enough. If you're working with Achieva Credit Union or an SBA lender you've worked with, make sure you get out there and see what you need, gather your items in order to submit an application. So how can you be eligible? The million-dollar question here. What are the size requirements for each loan program? So the PPP loan program says the greater of no more than 500 employees or their applicable employee size standards. So there's some charts that are available online that will show nonprofits, for-profit companies with fewer than 500 employees, sole proprietors, and the self-employed, as well as independent contractors. They must have been in operation as of February 15th of this year. As for the EIDL loan program, companies with no more than 500 employees, including cooperatives, nonprofit organizations, sole proprietorships, and self-employed, as well as independent contractors, are also available to apply for this loan. The same goes for the EIDL grant and is usually applied for when you apply for a traditional economic injury disaster loan. For the use of proceeds for these type of loan programs, the Paycheck Protection Program loan, those funds can be used to pay payroll, group health benefits, salaries and employee commissions, interest on mortgages, rent, utilities, and interest, and debt incurred before February 15th, 2020. For the EIDL loans, as I had mentioned, this is more of a kind of a cash flow loan. These funds can be used to pay fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, basically any other bills that otherwise cannot be paid because of the COVID-19 disaster. So how long will these processes take? Before we get to that, I want to make sure I stress how these loans are applied for. So the EIDL loan is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. That is applied directly online through SBA.gov and the disaster assistance through the U.S. Department of the Treasury. So that is specifically between the business and the federal government. Those funds are coming directly from the United States Small Business Administration. The Paycheck Protection Loan Program, however, that is directly through lenders. So folks like Achieva Credit Union, you call your local credit union, bank, whoever you partner with to find SBA approved lenders in your area. There is an online portal, and to the extent we can all help you here, by all means, please reach out at the end of this presentation. So turning to the first bullet point on this slide. Oh, sorry. Can we go back to the last slide? Sorry about that. We go back. making Pamela's life difficult here. Sorry about that. So how long will the process take? I already mentioned that the grants legislation said that they should be rolled out within the first 72 hours. We've seen some delays there from my knowledge, but that should be as soon as you are approved for an EIDL loan, those funds should be right into your account. The EIDL loan itself that's applied for on SBA.gov directly online, we are told that at application, those disbursements of funds usually occur within the first 2 to 3 weeks of the application filing. As for the Paycheck Protection Loan Program, that is directly through the lenders, and it will vary depending on who you work with. So it's at the speed of the way that the lenders can process those applications. And keep in mind, that's why it's important to go to a lender that knows the SBA and knows this process, where non-traditional lenders that don't typically work in SBA will be approved. They have to get approval to be one of those qualified lenders from the SBA. Whereas if there's a lender that does SBA loans, they do not require approval from the SBA in order to process those applications. The second bullet point there, the maximum amount of the loan or grant, I'm sure you're all wondering about that because that can also play into account of which option you want to choose. The EIDL loans are up to $2 million. So when that's the one you apply for online, and the cap on those loans is up to $2 million. The PPP loan program is the lesser of $10 million, or for companies that have been in business for a year, 2.5 times the average monthly payroll for the preceding 12 months. So there's some special rules in there that we don't have time to get into as it relates to seasonal businesses because, you know, as you can imagine, the payroll is different when they're a seasonal business. I think the best way to do this, and certainly if you play this presentation back, I like to mention in form of examples. So the steps to calculate the loan amount that the lender will use is step 1, the aggregate payroll costs from the last 12 months for employees that reside in the US. Step 2, subtract any compensation paid to employees in excess of $100,000. So if you have any employees that earn over $100,000, for purposes of this calculation, they're capped at a $100,000 salary. Step 3, calculate the average monthly payroll costs and divide your step 2 by 12 to calculate the average monthly payroll costs. Step 4, multiply average monthly payroll costs from step 3 by 2.5. That's where I got that 2.5 times the average monthly payroll. And then last but not least, add any outstanding amount from the EIDL loans that you have taken between January 31st, 2020 and today's date. So to bring that in perspective in a very simple example, excuse me, let's say you have no employees that make over $100,000 a year. Your annual payroll is $120,000. Therefore, you divide it by 12 and your average monthly payroll is $10,000. Multiply that number by 2.5 and you have $25,000. So your maximum loan amount under the PPP loan program would be $25,000. A more complex example is, let's say you have some employees that make over $100,000 a year. Your outstanding EIDL loan of $10,000 is going to come into play because that's something you applied for earlier. And your annual payroll is about $1,500,000. You subtract the compensation amount when you deduct your employees that make over $100,000 and cap them at $100,000. And that will give you $1,200,000 as your annual payroll. Divide that number by 12, your average monthly payroll would be $100,000. Multiply that number by 2.5, and you have $250,000. Now, since you had an EIDL loan from $10,000, you would add that back in, and your maximum loan for the PPP loan program is $260,000. So this would be best to replay and pause and write those numbers down to see an example, but also trust your SBA lender partners and business advisors to help you with that calculation. Last but not least on the slide, limitations to payroll. There are no limitations to payroll on the EIDL loans. But for the payroll protection loan program, as I'd mentioned, the PPP loan cannot be used to pay payroll costs on compensation paid to individuals, including the self-employed, in excess of $100,000. Next slide, please. All right, some more good news. So for those of you familiar with SBA loans, there are quite a bit of fees involved in a lot of these loan programs, and one of them being the SBA guarantee fee. The president and the act wanted to make it clear, and they wanted to get funds into the hands of small businesses as quickly as possible. So this one is easy to compare. There are no guarantee fees or any other loan closing fees for the lender and the borrower on the PPP loan program or the EIDL loan program. So that is very, very big news, because generally these fees could add up and they don't apply to any of these loan programs. The interest rate, as you all are very lucky, because they just released the final rules late last night. So when this first was enacted by the CARES Act on March 27th, the payroll protection loan program stated that the interest rate would be no more than 4%. That number then was decreased to 0.5%. And as of last night, it just went up just a tad, but still very, very low and favorable. And now the PPP loan program interest rate is 1%. For the EIDL loans, the interest rate is 3.75% for profit borrowers and 2.75% for nonprofit borrowers. And of course, there's no interest rate on the $10,000 grant because it's not a loan. Last but not least on this slide, the payment options. So originally, earlier this week, and all this stuff is changing every day, but fortunately now that the application period began today, many of the lenders are starting to get the clarification they need on a lot of these items, and we're finally starting to see the final terms. So originally they had allowed for deferment of the PPP loan program, permitted up to 1 year. Now it's allowing for a 6-month deferment. The EIDL loan program is deferment of loan payments permitted for up to 1 year. Next slide, please. Continuing on with our comparison, do you need a personal guarantee? So typical SBA loans require guarantees, as you'll see, from any owner that owns 20% or more of the company. I'm also happy to say that under the Paycheck Protection Program loan, there is no personal guarantee requirements whatsoever. However, keep in mind for the EIDL loan, the economic injury disaster loans that you apply directly with the government online, there may be a personal guarantee a requirement there. And from what I'm seeing, loans over $200,000 may require a personal guarantee. As for collateral requirements, there are no collateral requirements under the Paycheck Protection Loan Program. However, in the EIDL loan program, collateral may be required for loans over $25,000. So either pledging business assets or possible real estate that you own, that may apply to those loans. But for the PPP loan program, that does not apply. Next slide, please. All right, so this is a big one. And this one is more geared towards the Paycheck Protection Program. And mind you, we're still, a lot of lenders and law firms like myself are still trying to see what goes into the loan forgiveness aspect. But for the EIDL loans, on an advance of $10,000 that is provided as a grant within the first 72 hours, that is not required to be repaid if your EIDL loan is denied. So even if you don't get approved for your EIDL loan, but you were approved for that initial $10,000 grant, it's a grant, not a loan, and you're not required to pay anything back on that grant. Please note, as I had mentioned earlier, that EIDL loan recipients, that you can't apply for the PPP loan for the same purpose, but you can refinance your existing EIDL loan into a Paycheck Protection Loan Program. So turning to the Payroll Protection Program loan, an amount equal to the sums paid by the borrower during the first 8-week period after the origination date of your loan. So the first 8 weeks after you get your PPP loan, as long as it's used for payroll costs, interest payment on mortgage and rent, utilities, and other interests, they may be forgiven in a tax-free forgiveness. And one of the main questions that you're going to get or have for people is, I hear this payroll costs. Well, what do you include in that payroll costs? The SBA in their final interim rule has laid out what they treat payroll costs, and those are what you would typically think of as salary, commissions, any variable wages there, parental leave, sick leave, unemployment insurance, group healthcare costs, and payments for 401k retirement funds, as well as state and local taxes. Kind of losing my breath here. Sorry, everybody. All right, you can go to the next slide now. It may be the final slide. So this is a type of presentation, given the amount of information that's out there right now that may be available to everybody. I cannot stress it enough to partner with your SBA lender contacts. Our firm, Trenholm, will be releasing and sharing with all the folks that we've been collaborating with on this webinar, a helpful chart that we're going to be updating. Our firm has been broadcasting blogs and updates related to the CARES Act, but I think as a helpful resource for everybody, we are going to update a chart that goes through the different programs that I had just talked about and put it in a very user-friendly, easy-to-read format that will basically cover everything I just talked about for the past half hour. And that way it would allow businesses to get all the information they need in order to reach out to their lender contacts to take better advantage of this program and a lot of programs offered through the SBA. I think I will end with saying it's very important to look at these programs closely and see what is best for each one of the small businesses for the long term. I appreciate Achieva Credit Union and everybody through the City of Dunedin helping with their small businesses and allowing for me to share this information to you all today. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Paul. We have gotten some great questions coming through the Q&A chat, so I'm going to start going through those now. First one, if you have a rental property and the tenant does not pay rent, but you do not have any employees on payroll, can you get any help from the CARES Act?
That's a great question. So I guess I will preface that question with a question. Is if the rental property is owned by you individually, then it wouldn't be considered a small business. So if you own a property in the form of an LLC or any other business, and you are, let's say, the 100% owner of that business that owns a residential property or a commercial property that you rent, then yes, you could be qualified under CARES Act or an EIDL loan program. But keep in mind that even if you are the sole proprietor or the sole employee, if you will, that is actually a part that I did not touch on in the webinar presentation. Even though the applications roll out today, April 3rd, that is just for businesses under 500 employees that qualify for the programs and have a payroll. They do not open up for independent contractors or sole proprietors without payrolls until April 10th. And I'm reading between the lines there, and I'm thinking that the SBA, the reason why they're giving businesses with payrolls a 7-day head start is because the Paycheck protection loan program is first come, first serve, and they want to make sure that the small businesses that have massive payrolls have the ability to submit applications first, and then allow independent contractors and sole proprietors and 100% owned companies the ability to apply on the 10th.
Okay, thank you. Next question, and I will note there are a lot of questions coming in now, of course, which is great. And if we aren't able to get to all of them, we'll compile them with answers to post on our website along with the video if we do run out of time. So we will make every effort to find answers to all of your questions and get them out there available for you. So the next question for the PPP loan, I have both W-2 employees and 1099 contractors. Are both types applicable?
Sorry, can you repeat that again, Chelsea? There, I got chat kind of interrupted that.
Okay, no problem. For the PPP loan, I have both W-2 employees and 1099 contractors. Are both types applicable?
Great question. So under the PPP loan program, unfortunately, so you'll submit your payroll information that includes your 1099 employees. However, under the Paycheck Protection Program applied for by your business, they will not take into account your 1099 employees. Instead, on April 10th, those independent contractors or 1099s will have to apply separately. And so I saw a chat just come up right before that question come up right before that question came in from Chelsea, and I will repeat. The application period starts today for many of these small businesses, but the 10th of April is when that's open for independent contractors and those businesses without payroll.
Okay, thank you. I see one here also. If I already applied online through the SBA and have confirmation number, can I still work through Achieva? Laurel, are you here to answer that one?
I am, and my suggestion would be if you've already applied and you have a confirmation number due to the funds availability and the first come, first serve, I would hold on to and stay with that lender that you are already approved with. It's not that Achieva does not want to receive your application, but if you already have that number assigned, that means you're already queued up in the queue for that. And I would hate to have you fall out of your placeholder, if you will, in the event that, for whatever reason, funds are already used up. So I would hang on to that because it's done by your TIN number when the application IDs are, or the application numbers are assigned out.
I echo that, Chelsea. This is Paul again. That's helpful advice. Thank you, Laurel.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of questions regarding, can you apply for both or all programs?
Great question. Yes. So in short, yes. When you apply for an EIDL loan online, you will also be applying for the EIDL grant program. And if you are approved for the grant, you will hopefully get the $10,000 within the first 72 hours. And as I had mentioned, it may be lagging a little bit, but the legislature has said that you should be getting that grant within the first 72 hours. And then if you're approved for the EIDL loan online through the SBA, you can not apply for the Paycheck Protection Loan Program for the same purposes, although you can refinance that EIDL loan into the PPP. So I wouldn't advise applying to both of them. I would weigh your options and see which one's best for you. But if you applied for the EIDL loan program prior to this information coming out as early as last night, and getting this information, that doesn't mean you can't refinance and apply through a PPP loan with your existing EIDL. So I'll preface that while you technically can get involved in both programs, you should not and cannot apply for both at the same time.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to sort of combine a couple of questions into one that's sort of twofold. Are there loan assistant options available for businesses with just one owner and no employees, and also for businesses with just 1099 contractors?
Yes. So both options are available. I would say more of the EIDL loan program is within the first 2 to 3 weeks, could be something that would be processed quicker. Keep in mind, everything is on a case-by-case basis, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's really depending on the type of business you have. So take into account what may be your loss of sales or lost profits, and since sole proprietors and 1099 independent contractors still have to wait another week to apply for a PPP loan, they may want to look into EIDL loans today, or if they have some waiting power and they don't need the cash flow, they can wait out until April 10th to apply for the PPP loan program. I'm not sure if I addressed all of that question together, Chelsea, but I think I covered that.
Okay, thank you. Here's just a clarification for something that you mentioned in your presentation. Did you say interest on rent or rent cost related to the first weeks of PPP?
So it's payroll cost, which is that laundry list of items related to payroll. This includes payment on any mortgage, rent, utilities, or other interests. So it would be an interest payment on mortgage, rent, and utilities.
Okay, and then next here, does your business have to be closed down to qualify for PPP, or can the business still be active even if struggling?
So absolutely does not have to be closed down. I think a lot of this was because in light of the state of Florida and the federal government and various shutdowns having business close their doors. By no means does this preclude businesses that are still operating right now and for the most part on their books looking like they're doing well. I think there's various certifications you have to certify on the application that you submit to your lender. But keep in mind, you know, there are some businesses out there that are still running. They're very virtual. They don't have brick and mortar offices. Or if they do, they may be shut down, but still operational. And on their books, maybe a lot of their invoices and payments come in the first of the month. So as far as March goes and February, they look like they're doing really well and they're on schedule. But due to the economic uncertainty of COVID-19, it's not safe to say how they will react in the months going forward. So I would say, even though you are still running, you did not close your doors, but you do expect some slowdown. You do expect some employees who are out of work. This program is definitely available to those that are currently running. Obviously, it's definitely available to those who have had to shut down completely.
Okay, thank you. And follow up there, how does PPP work with employees receiving unemployment payments due to recent layoffs?
Right, that's a great question, and unfortunately, it would be a very, very long answer for that, and we would have a whole separate webinar on that as far as loan forgiveness. But I can speak to the PPP loan because that's specific to payroll. EIDL, that wouldn't necessarily come into play unless you were using those funds for payroll costs and wanted to refinance into a PPP loan. But for PPP loans, in order for the loan to be forgiven, you must, and hopefully Achieva, our office, or any other players outside of this webinar can speak more to this, but you would have any furloughed employees or employees let go due to COVID-19 would have to be rehired and be on the payroll and the funds used for payroll in order to be eligible for much of that loan forgiveness. So essentially it is for employers to keep their folks employed and on the payroll. So you would anyone let go within that time in order to have total loan forgiveness, you would have to rehire prior to that end of the term, June 30th, 19th. And again, there's a lot more information related to that. So I recommend you reach out to your lenders or to me specifically, and I can give you more information on that.
Thank you. And Laurel, a couple of Achieva specific questions here for you. Do you need to be an Achieva member to partner for a PPP loan? And is Achieva Credit Union an approved SBA lender for PPP?
Thank you, Chelsea. The answer would be yes to both of those. We are a credit union, so we are looking for the membership to be able to service your loan through the PPP program. So part of that would be becoming a member of Achieva. And then, and I'm sorry, Chelsea, the second question so I can answer it correctly.
Sure. Is Achieva Credit Union an approved SBA lender for PPP?
Yes, we are. We are already a approved SBA lender. We're actually out on their site as an approved SBA lender that you can verify that information. And we are getting questions on the PPP program because of that.
Okay, thank you. I see a couple of questions about how to submit the application. Do we submit PPP application online or at an approved branch?
Currently, right now, to submit your PPP application, you can submit that to if you have an existing lender, you can submit it to your existing lender, or you can submit it through to Achieva. We are in process of getting our website updated now that we have the application, so that you'll have the application available to you and a way to submit it through our website. So that is coming and should be built this afternoon, from what I understand. If you have any questions to that, Chelsea will share some information in the slide presentation and how to reach Achieva, and we can direct you from there if you decide to go with us.
Thank you, Laurel.
You're welcome.
Okay, here says, I applied last week for an EIDL loan. I have not heard anything, but I do have an application number. How do I find out my status, if I've been approved or denied, and can I reapply?
That is a great question, and I wish I owned a small business myself, so I could have gone through that application online. I assume that sometimes they put you in touch with an actual loan officer from the SBA as it relates to the EIDL. So again, just as a reminder, the EIDL loans are done directly online through the SBA if you do not want to go directly to a lender for the PPP loan program. So I would say if you have not heard back from the SBA and you have a number, there's some various contact information you may have been given in the application. I would try calling. I know right now they're probably being bombarded, so I apologize in advance for probably the long wait time you may have. But the assigned SBA loan officer to your application would be the best person to talk to about that, assuming you've heard back from one. I'm sorry, I can't provide more guidance on that. But Chelsea, I'll add up to follow up on another question that they just had that I didn't mention in my presentation. So the SBA also, everyone keep in mind, the SBA used to, or does in traditional senses, require you to try to maintain credit elsewhere. That has been waived as well. So even if you have ownership and means of acquiring funds at another area, you're not required to show that you're able to receive credit elsewhere. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that, so they're not hesitant to apply because they think they can get funds other areas. SBA lenders for the PPP loan program, like Achieva, would still be willing to help businesses like that, even if they have ability to obtain credit elsewhere.
Okay, you may have answered this one, but I'm not positive, so I'll throw this out there. If you have an existing line of credit, can you still apply for PPP?
So if the SBA is a line of credit through the SBA, then yes. So keep in mind that if you do have some financing, it's best to reach out to the lender you're working with, and in this case, in your line of credit or any loan. Because there may be some provisions in your loan documents that require consent from those lenders if you're obtaining subsequent financing. So if you have a line of credit with a lender, let's say you have a line of credit with Achieva through the SBA or not throughout the SBA, that's a perfect opportunity to touch base with their SBA lending team. I cannot stress this enough. I think relationships are always important in the loan atmosphere, but they're certainly more important now, because if you have good relationships with someone that is a qualified SBA lender, then you'll get that response. Otherwise, with the first come first serve and the actual demand for this product, if you're not in quick, you may not have access to it until later on. So just keep that in mind and reach out to your lender that you have the line of credit with or the prior loan with to make sure that this will not interfere with that.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions related to differentiating the EIDL grant and the EIDL loan. If you apply for one, are you also applying for the other, or is this a separate process?
So I can say that the application for both is directly online through the U.S. Department of Treasury, and that's www.sba.gov /funding-programs/disaster-assistance. So if you just Google EIDL loan application, it'll probably direct you to SBA.gov in that application. So the link to apply for both is the same. So I presume if the grants have not run out yet, you can apply for the grant. And even if you are approved for the grant and denied for the EIDL loan, you still don't have to pay that grant back. So even though the application appears to be in the same location, you can either get approved for both or one and not the other.
My apologies, I was on mute. Paul, I'm not sure if you're able to see the Q&A, but if you are, feel free to jump in on any that you see. I'm just trying to kind of sort through what we've discussed and what we haven't.
Yes, I'm sorting through those myself.
Okay. So for example, here's a new one. When figuring out salaries for tip employees, do you include their tips in hourly wage?
That's tough. I haven't actually been asked that question. I know the payroll, for the payroll calculation and the costs, it's talking about salary and commission and variable wages. So I guess the question I would have for my SBA lender is whether or not they calculate those tips as commission or variable wages. I would assume that maybe that would be lumped into that. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that. I do know that I can say for certain that the SBA has defined payroll costs as salary, commission, variable wages, parental leave, sick leave, unemployment, insurance expenses, group healthcare costs, payments for retirement benefits, 401k contributions, state, local taxes. And keep in mind those salaries are capped at $100,000. So if anyone makes over that, for purposes of the payroll cost calculation, they have to be limited to $100,000 as their cap.
Okay, and I see here, Susan, we didn't quite clarify your answer, so sorry about that. So I'll put this one out there again. If my business is an escort and I have one employee on payroll, will I qualify for PPP? I do have several 1099 contractors, and I also, in essence, get paid, but it's with whatever profit my business has left at the end of the year.
Okay, so if I'm understanding that question correctly, yes, you would qualify for PPP, and you'd be able to apply for the individual on your payroll separately through your businesses, but the 1099 the 1099 employees would have to apply separately. So yes, your businesses would qualify for a PPP loan under those facts presented, and you would apply through that business. But then later on, the separate 1099 will have to apply separately. I think that answered it. Could be wrong.
Thank you. Here's a great one, Paul. If there are there any special requirements for a church that would apply for the PPP?
So it would depend on their designation. So I know nonprofits are. So depending on the type of church, I know there's all different types. I actually have not been asked that question yet. So I think it would fall under their designation. I know for purposes of the SBA's small business and qualified standards, maybe Laurel or someone at Achieva has been asked that question, but absent knowing its actual designation, I'm not sure if they would qualify.
And Paul, this is Laurel. We have not been asked that question yet, and we are asking that question actually on our call that we're having this afternoon with the SBA, because there are some follow-up questions that we are needing to have clarified, and that is one of the questions. And Chelsea, we will add that to the list of items that you're collecting so we can provide that back to the callers.
Perfect. It looks like we're looking for some clarification on the Achieva membership requirements. Bren, you do need to be an Achieva member to work with us, but you can become an Achieva member through this process, correct, Laurel? So if you're not already, you can still work with us.
Absolutely. We're actually, so far for the people that have contacted us, we are sending out documentation to establish that membership along with the PPP application so we can do it in tandem. So if that's something you're interested in, that is something that we can do for you, and we can do that as one process.
Thank you. This is a good one. If you have an automobile that is used for your business, can that be classified as a business expense?
If it's a business vehicle, then any expenses related to it usually would. I'm not a CPA. If you have a CPA, I would reach out to them, your financial advisors, and those who are work with your businesses for purposes of payroll, for the payroll Paycheck Protection Program loan. That is independent of what you would what you would provide, but assuming that you are also asking questions related to your business expenses, I recommend reaching out to your accounting folks and make sure that business vehicles are in fact used for that purpose. And I also see something here. So am I right understanding you should apply for PPP first before EIDL? If that's specific to your business, then you could take it that way. By no means am I trying to prioritize one program over the other. EIDL is more of a cash flow, a loan program that's not specific to payroll costs, interests, payments on mortgage, rent, utilities, and other interest. Economic injury disaster loans can be used for legitimate business purposes, but keep in mind if they're not used for payroll costs and interest payments on mortgage, rent, utilities, and other interests, then they would not be qualified to be refinanced under the PPP loan program. So there are limited, from what I see, collateral requirements and personal guarantee requirements on the EIDL loans. The turnaround time I'm seeing in places in North Florida and Georgia that have applied online between 2 and 3 weeks, and you're not working with a lender. And payroll protection loan programs, those, as I had mentioned, can be up to 10 million depending on how you break down your payroll costs. And obviously a lot of the underlying collateral requirements and guarantees and fees are waived. So but the PPP loan program is definitely newer, and it's just been finalized pretty much as of today. The economic injury disaster loan program has been around for several weeks. And whether or not the options of which one you should look to first is dependent on your business. I may have lost the audio. Can everyone hear me? I can't hear anybody anymore.
Hey, Paul, I can still hear you. This
Okay.
is Pam. Do you have any more questions? Paul?
I don't have any questions on my part. I know that there's probably many questions out there, and we'll do our best to answer them. My contact information is on the slides, and I'd be happy to partner with Achieva in helping people get what they need to process these applications.
Okay, well, any further questions, you can send an email to Achieva on the at the achieva.com website, events@achieva.com. You can send your questions. We'll get them answered, and we'll get them up on the Achieva website, the Dunedin City website, dunedingov.com, and the Chamber website, dunedinfl.com. And this whole webinar will be posted hopefully later today. We're all learning how to do things as we get through this. But I know that a couple of people have been kicked off. We don't know why. As I said,
Hi,
we're all
Pam,
learning.
I'm back.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Thanks
That's all
for
right.
throwing those websites out there. And I did want to mention too that we'll post some FAQs from this as well in a document on the websites along with the live recording to try to get you some clear answers to the great questions that were coming through.
So at this time, we're ready to end this. Correct, Chelsea?
Okay, I believe so. We really appreciate you guys joining us, and look forward to continuing to partner with you, and hope that you'll visit these websites to review the resources that we're posting there for you, and reach out if there's anything we can do to assist. And otherwise, everyone stay well and stay healthy, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a good webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Stay safe.